Well, hello everybody and welcome to week 11, which is the penultimate week of the course. You'll see when you log on to Moodle that you can access both this week and next week, and I would treat it as a single block because essentially this is about completing the work that you're currently doing, all of the elements of the portfolio, bringing it together, ready for submission at the end of next week. You'll see that you have a range of specific tasks to do this week. And with the exception of one chapter next week, next is just a continuation, getting all of that continued and completed. If you have any questions or points of clarity, please don't hesitate to contact either me, John Paul or Elaine. I think the most important bit of advice at this stage in the course is to go back to the handbook and read again and check that you've completed all of the things you need to do. You're gathering together all of the bits of the portfolio that you need to submit, and you're working within the guidelines, which is to do with sort of approximate word length guidelines about which bits are more practical, which bits need to be linked to which course outcomes, which bits need to be supported by reading, and so on. Okay. We're happy to read short extracts of any elements if you want us to just sort of check that you're writing in the right tenor, but we're not going to look at complete drafts. I think to reassure you, if there are things that when you submit we feel that need to be reworked, we will give you the opportunity to do a short rework. Not a massive rewrite of your portfolio, but you can tweak little bits, so please don't get into a panic. The most important thing is that you refer back to the handbook and the week-by-week guidance and check that you're completing and submitting all of the elements that you need. Just while we're talking about the portfolio, I'd like to remind you about something important. You're going to send us either a link to an online shared platform or whatever portfolio it might be, a series of PDFs collected together. However you do it is entirely up to you. But remember, it will be read by your tutor and one other of us on the course, because we double mark everything. And then a random selection will be sent to the external examiner, Ruth Pilkington. I can't tell you at this stage who they will be. That's depends on the total number of submissions and a random selection and so on. But bear in mind who sees it and issues around privacy and not naming people unless you have their explicit permission to quote them and so on. The other thing I think about the portfolio is to remember that when it goes to the external examiner, and to some extent the second marker, they won't necessarily know as much about you as maybe your tutor does. So just make sure things are contextualised and you explain a bit about who you are, what you do, and why things are written in a particular way. So that's about it, really. Don't forget to make sure this week you're clarifying anything, because it's this week and next week that you're concluding all of your work. At the end of this week, you should have revisited your diagnostic and put together a CPD action plan. And that CPD action plan, sorry, the sun's just come out, it's really, really bright here. The action plan is really pulling through from the course and identifying, perhaps by going back to your diagnostic and things that emerge through the course and where you feel you are now, what it is that you want to focus on for the coming year. It might be longer term, you might have a longer term goal than that, and that's fine to include. But at the end of this process, hopefully you gain CEDA fellowship. Thereafter, each year as a CEDA fellow, you're asked to take part in a CPD triad, and you'll be linked by the CEDA office to two other CEDA fellows, and you'll write a CPD action plan reviewing the previous year and so on. So this will be your first annual plan, and next year, as part of your triad, you'll reflect on this plan and what you've achieved, and then plan again for the following year. Okay, so this week is about reading around evaluation, preparing your CPD plan by looking back at your earlier diagnostic and looking forward to the work you have ahead of you, and over this week and next week pulling together all of the elements of the portfolio. And if you are not going to meet the deadline of the end of next week for submission, you must formally apply for an extension, and that will be very time limited. We won't rule it out, and we'll try and be supportive, but just bear in mind that we need to be marking everything together. And although you will still have access to the course and the readings and the links, anything that you do now won't count as engagement on the course, because you won't actually be joining in any discussions. You'll just be reacting to forums that have already happened. So please do the very best you can to get your work in by the end of next week. Any formal applications will be considered up to the end of next week. We need to hear from you before the end of the course if there's going to be any issue with submitting on time. And thereafter it would be counted as a non-submission. Okay, so just bear all of that in mind. Good luck with this week and next, and I'll post a final podcast at the beginning of next week to conclude the course. Okay, so thanks very much. Bye now.